This video contains major spoilers for Persona 3 Portable. Persona 3 Portable is a game that I want to love, but for the life of me, I just can't. It has so many great aspects, but is completely brought down for a few reasons. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. Some info about my Persona background. I saw a bunch of Persona 5 gameplay when it came out. I never spoiled myself past about the first 5 or so hours of gameplay because I knew I wanted to play it, but I never had a PlayStation. Once Persona 5 Royal came to Switch, I knew I had to play it. Played P5R, loved it to death. Honestly, it's probably a top 3 game of all time for me. And once I finished, I decided to pick up Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden when they came to Switch. Anyway, back to the review. Now, I know that opening was a bit of a bold statement, so let me briefly go over the basics of P3P for those who haven't played the game. It behaves similarly to other Persona games where your time is split in half between a high school life sim and a dungeon crawling RPG. You go to class, hang out with friends, and work part time jobs during the day, but then at night, there exists a hidden hour between one day and the next, the dark hour. Most people transmogrify into coffins. However, there exist some who remain human during the dark hour and have the ability to wield a persona. Personas being the manifestation of the user's inner self. In order to summon one, you need an evoker, point it at yourself, and pull the trigger. Shooting yourself to fight enemies is peak 2000s edginess. At the heart of the Dark Hour's mystery is Tartarus, a massive tower that replaces Gekakon High during the Dark Hour. A group of students have to come together to form SEAS, the Special Extracurricular Execution Squad, in order to solve the mystery of the Dark Hour. Shadows roam Tartarus, and you and your group slowly start climbing the tower to hopefully find some answers. However, during a full moon, a strong shadow will leave Tartarus and attack the town. The number of apathy syndrome cases rise as a full moon draws near and fall after a powerful shadow is defeated. Apathy syndrome being a mysterious illness that has been running rampant on Tatsumi Port Island that causes victims to fall into a vegetative state. The group learns that each powerful shadow correlates to one of the 12 major arcana, and once they defeat all 12, the Dark Hour will end. Naturally, they prep for each month's attack by climbing the floors of Tartarus. That's the basic setting of P3P. And I love it. It's such an interesting scenario. There are so many unique things to keep track of, and they all play off each other to create this very intriguing world. But the game doesn't really do much with its setting. The story doesn't really go anywhere until the last third of the game, and you're stuck with a very underwhelming plot for 20 to 30 hours. I think the biggest problem lies in the way the game is structured. The 12 shadows you defeat are really just boss fights. All of them have unique designs, some of them have interesting mechanics. I actually really did love the roulette fight. But none of them make any appearances outside of the 30 minutes or so you fight them. And that's fine for a while, it really is. But the lack of any sort of centralized antagonist for roughly half the game is mind-boggling. I don't understand how people manage to stay motivated to play the game when the plot doesn't move forward. Once the game does introduce some type of antagonist, it helps a little. Strega's a really unique group of characters who don't get nearly enough screen time. I will say I really love Chidori, particularly her interactions with Junpei once she's been captured. Their dialogue is so well written as you slowly peel back the layers of her psyche. I felt those two probably had some of the best character development in the game, and it played really well into the theme of what does it mean to live. However, the other two members of Strega, Jin and Takaya, are very underdeveloped. Side note, I actually had to Google Takaya's name because I legitimately couldn't remember it. When one of the most important antagonists and the penultimate boss is so forgettable that I can't remember his name, that's a problem. I think if Atlas gave Strega more of a consistent role in the story, that would alleviate some of the issues here. Maybe have them act in a similar manner to Girahim in Skyward Sword, where Seas and Strega cross paths consistently on the way to each of their goals. Now, I'm sure Atlas could come up with a better and more well thought out solution, but this is just an idea. The story does ramp up nearing the end. Really, once Jin and Takaya jump off the bridge, the pacing ramps up. But the fact that you have to wait so long, it becomes more of a finally something is happening instead of a man, things are really picking up. I guess that brings me to my final issue with the plot, and that's the ending. I think the whole idea of Ryoji slash Pharaoh slash Thanatos being one with Nyx is good. And I think it's well integrated into Aigis' story and development. But why do we learn most of this from the Akutsuki twist villain reveal? Look, that part bothered me so much, even during the sequence. It comes out of nowhere, which is fine on its own. I don't inherently have a problem with twist reveals. But it lasts a whole, what, 5 minutes? He dumps a bunch of info, kills Mitsuru's father, and then dies? Okay, I guess? I feel like this would have been a great opportunity to develop a new antagonist. One who completely fooled and used C's throughout the course of the game to achieve his goals. But nope, dude just goes out like Snoke in Star Wars. A completely unrealized character. I really felt like Atlas wrote themselves into a corner and couldn't find a way to explain the transition from the 12 Shadows to Nyx. They could have even connected Ikutsuki to Strega, which wouldn't have felt like nearly the stretch. Ikutsuki has been around the Dark Hour for a while now, and it's not unlikely that they would have interacted with each other. Anyway, enough about the disaster that is Ikutsuki's wasted character, and on to the actual ending. Now, I want to clarify that the ending of P3P is actually really awesome, in theory. In practice, however, it falls flat on its face. Within the context of the themes of P3P, the protagonist sacrificing himself to save humanity is perfectly in line. However, it's so vague and so poorly executed that it baffles me. You whimper out over the course of a few months after the final battle, and why? Why, if you sacrifice yourself to seal Nyx, do you continue to live on until graduation day? And before anybody says anything, yes, I realize this is covered in P3 FES, but I don't think that you should be forced to play another game to get answers to a very important event in the story. You know, like the ending? In fact, the ending is so vague that I didn't even realize the protagonist dies at the end. I thought they were just trying to figure out a way to close things out. I think it would have been great to see yourself slowly realize you're dying and having to come to terms with it over the course of an hour or so in the game. Again, this would have played very well into one of the themes of the game, accepting death. But nope, he just slowly falls asleep in the game cuts to credits. Look, I can understand this is a very artistic and mature approach to wrapping everything up, but I think it could have been far better executed. And that was kind of my takeaway from the entire plot of P3P. Great ideas, great world building, but subpar execution. Well, what about the dungeon crawling gameplay? It is half of the equation. Well, I'm sorry to say, but I actually enjoyed the plot far more than the dungeon crawling in P3P, which is really a shame. And this all goes back to what I just said. Great ideas, subpar execution. Tartarus is such a good idea in theory, but the execution is just abysmal. I don't know how this wasn't flagged in development, but it is legitimately the most baffling, glaring issue this game has. Slowly chipping away at this monumental task as you slowly unravel the mystery of the Dark Hour sounds awesome, but it ends up being a slog for 264 floors. Yeah, you heard that right. Tartarus has 264 floors. Any game that has 264 of anything is clearly going for quantity over quality, and let me tell you, there is absolutely no quality here. Tartarus is divided up into 6 blocks, each with their own unique style and tile set. Each block plays a variation of the Tartarus theme, but every single floor is literally just a bunch of hallways with enemies and some chests. That's it. No puzzles, no locked doors that you need to find keys for, nothing. You do get mini bosses every 10 or so floors, but those are really just beefed up versions of normal enemies. And I cannot overstate how mind numbingly boring it is to go through the blocks of Tartarus. Now, I'm someone who likes to make sure I'm well prepared for boss fights. While climbing the floors of Tartarus, I made sure to fight every enemy, explore the entirety of every floor, and pick up every chest. Despite this, I was significantly underleveled for the entirety of the game. I don't understand how my party was so weak the whole way. I would randomly struggle against certain mini bosses, blow past some, be fine against the 12 shadows, and it took me like an hour and a half to beat Nyx. I did think the Nyx fight was super interesting in spite of the time it took me to beat it, but I just don't understand the random peaks and valleys of the difficulty curve in this game. And I want to state that I was playing on normal for 90% of the game. It's not like I was doing some insane challenge run of the game. I was on normal. The last 20 or so floors of Tartarus, I turned the difficulty down to the lowest setting because I was tired of wasting my life away in Tartarus. Now, I will say this definitely did contribute to me being underleveled against Nyx, but not for the rest of the game. I think I didn't go about Tartarus the right way. So, over the course of the game, you obviously get new party members, right? And I'm assuming what Atlas wanted you to do is use them as upgrades to your existing party. I didn't do this. I tried to keep everybody in the party around the same level because, I want gameplay diversity. I don't want to see the same 4 people on the screen the whole game, and I want a flexibility of a full level party. I just really don't get the level curve in this game. I was also disappointed to see that the negotiation system that was present in Persona 5 wasn't in this game. However, I understand that this was a big advancement made by P5, so that doesn't really bother me too much. The fusion system in this game is awesome. I think it's a really great concept and a cool alternative to Pokemon's evolution system. I think it's really funny how starters have such a big emotional attachment in Pokemon, but in Persona, you fuse this insane manifestation of your soul with a pixie to make like a jack-o'-lantern. I was a little sad to see that you're not able to pick the skills inherited by fusion, but that's more of a minor nitpick. The core combat is satisfying. The whole weakness system and all-out attacks are always really rewarding to pull off, even if it does boil down to just trial and error. It's also really fun to fully utilize buffs and debuffs in this game. They're strong, like really strong. Good luck trying to beat this game without Akihiko absolutely neutering all of the enemies. That dude carried my playthrough. The difficulty of this game does force you to think of different strategies for a lot of the Tartarus mini-bosses. Fusing specific personas for specific fights is almost mandatory. So it's nice to see these two systems work hand in hand with each other to allow the player to engage with all of the game's mechanics. On to the presentation. And oh boy, this is the best part. After beating P5R, I had really high hopes for this game. While it's certainly nowhere near as stylish as Persona 5, I can tell this is where the roots sprouted. I like the light blue theme that's present throughout the game. It's a very calming contrast to all the, you know, death. One subtle touch that I never noticed until the last few hours of the game is that the battle UI is actually the chamber of a revolver. I was blown away once I realized it. If you pick the female protagonist, the blue changes to pink. While I'm not a very big fan of the hip hop genre, I really appreciate the centralized musical identity it creates. This game is very mid 2000s, and the soundtrack complements that era. A few of my favorite tracks are When the Moon's Reaching Out Stars. I've never felt like so mid-syllable. I've never felt like thinking this will last forever. They're just with me. You gotta tell no hurricane all over me. When stars smile. Changing Seasons. And of course, the poem for everyone's souls. Composer Soji Meguro really does a great job sticking to a genre and basing an entire soundtrack around it. Now, P3P was developed for the PSP, so Atlas did have to make some compromises. The life sim parts play out in the form of a visual novel. That's right, there are no 3D models or environments for a large portion of the game. This really pulled me out of the experience. Seeing the world through a flat 2D JPEG makes it feel like you're a spectator in the world rather than a major player. Yes, I know that P3 and P3 FES don't have this problem, but since Atlas decided to release P3P on Switch, I'm taking that to mean that they think P3P is the definitive version of the game. While this doesn't ruin the game, it is definitely a major detractor, especially in the cutscenes. And by cutscenes, I mean what should have been a cutscene is instead just a still image of a single frame in the cutscene. Seeing the protagonist robotically pick up his evoker for the first time and stiffly summon his persona is just painful. And the sad part is that the cutscenes are actually really well done if you go on YouTube and watch them. Again, it's just another thing that pulls you out of the experience. It's hard to feel emotional when a character like Shinjiro dies when it's just a bunch of text and voice acting, especially when it was already so much more. On another note, I really like the opening of P3P. The duality between the male and female protagonist is really cool, and I love all of the words and phrases that flash on the screen. All of them are related to death in some way and immediately establishes that this is not going to be a triumphant journey, but a somber one. I guess the last thing I can talk about is the social links. I wasn't sure whether to put this in the plot section or the gameplay section, so I'm just going to lump it in here. I'm torn about how I feel about them in this game. Some of them I really like. Igus is a particular gem. Her voice actor, Karen Strassman, did an amazing job of slowly transitioning to sound more human as the social link went on. I personally like Kazushi's story of trying to be strong for somebody else, but others just really aren't interesting. The Gourmet King is not good. Student Council guy is kind of lame. It's just really boring. And what blows me away is that social links with certain party members are locked behind which gender you choose at the beginning of the game. No, I don't want to gay romance Akihiko, but he's cool and I want to know more about his story. Others have needlessly vague unlock conditions. At least I think they do. I remember seeing that if you have genius knowledge, you can unlock the Mitsuru social link. So I kept that in the back of my mind throughout the game. And once I raised my social stat enough, I went to go talk to her, only to be given a vague hint of how to progress further. Like she's busy right now or something. Keep in mind, I hadn't even started the social link yet. This was just to start hers. I feel like party members should be the easiest of the social links to start since they're so integral to the story. It's a small change, but I really would have liked to have gotten to know Mitsuru over the course of a game instead of scrambling to figure out why I can't talk to her with only a couple months left in the game. Look, I'm fine with having side characters be more obscure with their unlock conditions. Totally fine with that. I didn't even discover some of the social links. But players shouldn't have to resort to a guide to be able to fully engage with your game's systems. Anyway, I feel like I've been rambling about this game for long enough now. At this point, it's becoming longer than a lot of the papers I've written for school. And this is my first review that I've ever made for a game. It's just something I feel really passionate about since I adored P5R and saw people gushing about this game before I played it. Going back to what I said at the beginning of this review, I think this game is almost amazing. I've heard that there are apparently rumors going around about a P3 remake, and while I think that's a good thing, Atlas would need to completely overhaul a lot of the game in order for me to go back and try it again. The core combat is great, but the difficulty curve would need some major retuning. I think the pacing of the story would need to be completely changed. A lot of the characters need better writing. Look, Koromaru is a good boy, but he's a bit of a waste of the party slot since he doesn't have a personality because he's a dog. He's just a dog. Some social links would need to be reworked and not locked between which gender you've chosen. I would love to see what they would change with the presentation, given how stylish P5 is. Above all, Tartarus would need to be completely reworked. If Tartarus is not redesigned to be some type of Zelda or P5 or SMT5 dungeon, I will not play it. I'm still in shock that the monotony of Tartarus made it through the planning stages of development, let alone the full release. Regardless, I need to wrap this up. So, like I said, Persona 3 Portable is a game that I want to love, but there are just too many things weighing it down. I know this video has pretty harshly criticized the game, so I want to say that I don't absolutely hate it. I think it has great world building, an awesome soundtrack, cool characters, and an intriguing premise. It's great when things are going well, but remains a dated relic of the JRPG genre. Thanks for watching.